English translation, 519th contact Saturday, the 2nd of April 2011, 13:58 hours.
It was just a quick correction work today. But that is good, because I have some things I want to say. Since the seaquake disaster in Japan also caused a lot of damage at the Fukushima nuclear power plant, which has since caused radioactive particles to escape and spread very widely, I thought I would say something about the radioactivity of some chemical elements. And since most of the human beings do not deal with the radioactive substances and also not with their decay due to their half-lives, I would like to take up this matter for understanding and explain it in more detail. Although I am not a nuclear physicist, I think that I can explain what I have learned, even if my explanation may seem amateurish to some people. But it is all about making the half-life of radioactive substances understandable in its basic features, which should certainly be possible through my explanations. The half-life T1/2 of a radioactive substance consisting of one kind of radionuclides is the time after which, on average, half of a large number of initially present radioactive nuclides have decayed. It is a fixed quantity for each nuclide isotope. If, for example, 16 grams of cesium-137 with a half-life of 30.17 years are taken, then these are reduced by half to 8 grams after 30.17 years, to 4 grams after 60.34 years, to 2 grams after 90.51 years, to 1 gram after 120.68 years, to 0.5 grams after 150.85 years, and so again and again by half after 30.17 years, until the whole is completely dissolved. In order to give a somewhat broader overview of the radioactive nuclides, I have compiled the following series of radioactive nuclides nuclide == isotope and their half-lives.
It is probably good to address these things, because certainly not many Earth humans are familiar with them.
That is also what I thought, hence my explanation. But what I am interested in is the catastrophe in Japan. How are the earthquakes and seaquakes progressing? Because there are always aftershocks, around 1,000 of them so far, with a magnitude of up to 6.4 on the Richter scale.
The whole thing will continue for months to come, because the fire belt is currently showing very strong activity, and consequently there will also be stronger seaquakes and earthquakes again. But what has happened so far with regard to the disaster at the Fukushima nuclear power station is far worse than the disaster at Chernobyl 25 years ago. And according to our investigations and calculations, a massive seaquake of magnitude 7.4 will occur again in the period from the 7th/8th of April. A brief forecast has shown that another nuclear power station near Onagawa in northern Japan will suffer new damage to 3 reactors, and that radioactivity will leak out. In addition to all the following minor aftershocks, another severe seaquake of 7.1 magnitude will occur on the 11th of April. These heavier quakes are not aftershocks, but new main quakes, which again cause a large number of aftershocks. The coming period will be very unpleasant for the human beings in Japan, and in future also in the capital Tokyo, which is threatened with great destruction, since it is built on an Earth that is currently still dormant and is equally at risk as the city of San Francisco in the USA.
Unpleasant for the human beings who live there. Unfortunately, however, they cannot simply be relocated to other places, because there are too many of them. Tokyo is currently home to more than 36 million human beings, and San Francisco is also densely populated.
Unfortunately, nothing can be done, you say that correctly. But it must also be said that the Earth humans are extremely unreasonable, because building cities in which so many human beings live should not be allowed. But due to the abnormal overpopulation, there is practically no other possibility than to pile up the human beings like animals in mass housing.
Deserts, mountains, and jungles cannot simply be populated. The deserts would have to be reclaimed, while mountains are only habitable for the human beings up to a certain height. Primeval forests and other woodlands must also be preserved, because they are the lungs of the earth and provide the necessary oxygen for all life forms.
The Earth humans are well aware of this. But nevertheless, they are destroying more and more primeval forests and other woodlands, as well as large areas of meadows and floodplains, which are essential for human beings, animals, and creatures.
And the more human beings populate the planet, the more nature is destroyed simply by the fact that more and more space is needed for living and for factories, etc. But that is not enough, because nature is also being destroyed by overexploitation and chemicals, by exhaust fumes of all kinds, and by many other things in madness, and more species of animals and creatures are also being exterminated. But the human beings of the earth itself also suffer from this, for their catastrophic cultivation makes them more and more susceptible to diseases and epidemics of all kinds. This is because they no longer have any powers of resistance, and their immune systems are becoming weaker and weaker. Their sense of belonging, of community, and of healthy human relationships is also diminishing, and this is also evident in their children, who are brought up to be rude and unruly by blatant ill education, and as a result fall prey to brutality and unscrupulous treatment of weaker human beings, often to the point of murder. In return, they are handled with kid gloves by the judges, and straightforward murder is judged to be simple manslaughter, death by drunkenness, motor vehicle speeding or drug use, or a simple deed resulting in death, so that the guilty, juveniles and adults alike, are handled with kid gloves and get off with light sentences, if possible only a fine or probation. But the same song is also played in the rest of the penal code, which is becoming increasingly lax due to alleged humanity, so that even murderers who commit premeditated or deliberate murders get away with ridiculously mild sentences.
What you say about overpopulation and the destruction of nature is correct in every word. As is everything you say about the miseducation and degeneration of children and the much too lax penal legislation, which is based on a completely wrong humanism.
Unfortunately, the false humanists, who are usually religiously or sectarian influenced, are increasingly gaining the upper hand. On the other hand, however, these false humanists are again so perverse and degenerate that they immediately demand the death penalty, because they live in religious or sectarian delusion that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is justified humanely alone.
These are also incontrovertible facts.
Undeniable, but look here, I will read it to you. It is an article in the Appenzeller Zeitung that Christian Freiner faxed me on the 28th of March. The whole thing refers to our 2 conversations on the 14th of March about thermal power plants. As usual, it does not take long for an article to appear in any newspaper, or for a news item to appear on the radio or television about something we discussed during a conversation. So it is also like that here. But I think it is good that someone has come up with the correct idea. Although this article talks about geothermal energy from deep down in the earth instead of heat, it is the correct idea.
That is also how I see it.
Question. Did you discuss with Quetzal my request concerning my idea to make my own website or something similar, to publish short sayings and articles and to win like-minded people worldwide, who can also contribute their own thoughts to the site and maybe get in contact with each other, which could form a world community?
Just as you explained everything to me, I also presented it to Quetzal, after which we discussed your idea in detail. We both think that you have created a glorious idea that can create worldwide connections among like-minded people if you realize it.
I also think so, but somehow I fear that adversaries might appear and attack and insult those who honestly and dignifiedly strive for true love, peace, freedom, harmony, joy, happiness, and confidence, as well as contentment, justice, and righteousness, etc., and then publish their aspirations and opinions on my site.
Quetzal and I believe that there will be opponents who will have all the good values against their attitudes, but somehow it should be possible to ignore them or keep them out of the hole.
Tonight I will raise my concerns at the General Assembly, and we will see what can be done. However, I fear that troublemakers and antagonists can hardly be excluded from such a matter, because the internet offers too many opportunities for such elements to be attacked.
Quetzal and I have also discussed this, but we think that you should still not shrink back, but realize your idea. It is really very good because, as you have explained to me, such action can unite many like-minded people worldwide to form a world community and work towards the realization of high human values. The one human being carries the good on to the next, resulting in a constantly expanding chain that includes more and more like-minded human beings limb by limb.
This is the sense of my idea, in which I also include that all contributors draw their contributions honestly with their first name, and that no personal data or photos should be included. If photos, then only of landscapes and flowers, etc.
Quetzal's opinion is that all suitable platforms available on the internet should be used to provide references to your website.
He probably means links?
Yes.
Then it all depends on what is decided at the General Assembly.
In my opinion, it is your idea, so you don't have to ask for permission, and you can realize the whole thing on your own.
Of course I do, but I need help, because I have no experience with the internet to do something like that. But we will see.
The matter will turn out in the correct way, also if there are misunderstandings at first.
That will probably be the case, but the mistake is certainly mine, because unfortunately I know practically nothing about the necessary things, and am a zero in this. In particular, I don't know how something has to be handled in the above-mentioned relationship. In fact, I can be glad that I can operate the computer at all. But something else. Quetzal once explained to me that there are 7 basic physical forces, and he also told me about them, but he told me to keep silent about them for the time being. That was in the middle of the 1980s. As far as I know, terrestrial physicists are also only aware of the 4 forces: gravitation, electromagnetism, and the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. Isn't it about time that the remaining 3 forces could also be named?
This should not yet be discussed, or the 3 remaining forces should not yet be mentioned. For the earthly physicists, it is not yet the time to call these things by name and to know them, because if they had knowledge of them and the knowledge of them, they would cause tremendous harm.
Then don't. But another question. Do you have all the clarifications regarding the individual Figu groups under wraps?
This work is done.
And is everything okay everywhere?
No, unfortunately it is not, because the group still has the same problem as I told you. Because the selfishness of was not settled by him, which leads to the fact that he puts himself in the foreground, demanding and is too determining towards the other members. In this selfishness, he not only wants to continue to think of himself as the most important person in the group, but he is also considering the idea of applying for core group membership in the near future. However, to accept him into the core group in the foreseeable future would be a fatal mistake, because all his selfish behavior would not only cause new unrest in the core group, but would also have destructive consequences. We have looked into this matter in detail and have come to the conclusion that, at least for 8 to 10 years, we will have to work very intensively on ourselves in order to become fit for core group membership. If he does not do so, then he cannot be accepted even after this period. It is not acceptable that new members are admitted to the core group, who then cause difficulties for years and want to determine the course of the group's affairs selfishly and arbitrarily. Such degenerations must not reappear, which would be the opposite of what would happen if we're to be accepted into the core group. So it requires that you bring this fact up at the next possible core group meeting so that all members are oriented.
I will do that, but only after I have received the report of the meeting and can distribute it.
There is nothing wrong with that, but I would like to mention that it would be good from side to exercise more restraint towards, because everything threatens to get out of hand again, and it will lead to great personal difficulties again in the end.
I cannot say anything about that, because I don't interfere in these things, because it's none of my business. It is now almost 10 years since you said that you have come across something very interesting in relation to the investigations of the various extraterrestrials who have come to Earth in the last 300 years. But you wanted to say something more about this only when you know all about it for sure. Is it about what I asked you to clarify some 30 years ago? Do you have any detailed information about it now?
Yes, we have this information, and it is based on many years of very laborious research and clarification. After 30 years of investigation and research, it has now been proven with absolute certainty that all known flights into Earth's airspace and landings on Earth by Earth foreigners have only occurred because all those who found their way to Earth had exact or halfway exact coordinates of the Lyra and Centaurus systems and the Sol system at their disposal, which they did not evaluate until thousands of years after their receipt and recovery. The interesting thing is that for all Earth foreigners who came to Earth, these data were based on very old and millennia-old records, which were based on connections with peoples from the very extensive Nocodemian line. And the fact that all these records have been analyzed by a wide variety of Earth foreigners' civilizations over the last 300 years was based on very old regulations, which were designed to ensure that these records were found and analyzed in more recent times, and that the respective Earth foreigners flew to the elaborated coordinates. The whole purpose of all this was to enable everyone to find their way to our Federation and unite with us. This was also the case for those who came from the Centaurus systems and from other areas. Some of the Earth foreigners who came to Earth, due to errors in coordination, strayed directly to Earth instead of reaching the Lyra system. Others were looking for the planet Melona Phaeton, which they did not find but came to Earth in their search. Others were looking for Mars but found it inanimate and finally came to Earth. But there were also those who suffered an accident, including the Gilgamesh spacecraft of the very early days, as well as the spacecraft that caused the Tunguska catastrophe. With one exception, all Earth foreigners who came to Earth in the last 300 years are now part of our Federation, and interestingly, all of them have proven that their early ancestors were, as I explained, connected with earlier peoples of the Nocodemian line from whom they have received records of the coordinates of the systems mentioned. They used this data to get to the Lyra and Centaurus systems and to the Sol system. If they hadn't had these coordinates from the ancient records, they would also never have come to Earth. So they only came here to your homeworld Earth by certain coincidences.
Asina and her people, what about them?
They also belong to it in the same way.
So then everything was predetermined. When was that? And did these strangers also make contact with the human beings on Earth?
The whole thing leads back to the time 389,000 years ago. Even then, everything was determined and directed in such a way that everything is fulfilled in modern times, and especially in the modern age. But this concerning the contact with Earth humans was not the rule, but it happened only in individual cases, and this also only by unexpected coincidences. With complete certainty, it is to be said, however, that these were extremely sparse, and the Earth humans involved in them kept silent about them because they did not dare to talk about them. And of the few Earth humans who in modern times unintentionally fell into direct physical contact, none is alive today. So among Earth humans, there are only a few of those who were contacted by us in impulsive telepathy, but who have no knowledge of it, 4 to be precise.
And what about all those who in all the countries of the world have been talking about themselves or still claim that they have been or are still in contact with some extraterrestrials and are receiving messages from them?
These are without exception nonsensical, untruthful assertions. From our side, there is also no contact with Earth humans, neither physically nor telepathically except with you, whereby it is to be said that Earth humans are not yet at all capable of telepathy. And as far as assertions are concerned, which refer to the so-called channeling, these are to be called absolute nonsense, because channeling is based on pure esoteric fantasy. A fate contact in Zahedan concerning my daughter Simyase with a woman from Germany was of no importance, and is just as well known to you as the former contacts with Anatol and Petra, who unfortunately lost their lives in their accident and could not work for your mission. And further, it is to be said that apart from us Plejaren and our Federation, no other Earth foreigners are on Earth or even penetrated or entered the Earth's airspace. Therefore, no Earth humans can have contact with any Earth foreigners. And all those Earth foreigners who came to Earth by the coincidence of the coordinates of the ancient Nocodemion peoples belong to our Federation today, and they too do not maintain contact with Earth humans. The only contacts that have ever existed and continue to exist relate to us, Plejaren, our Federation, and you.
So that in relation to the last 300 years?
That is correct, because it is for that time that we have been making our inquiries.
But what if unknown flying objects are observed?
If they are Earth foreigners flying apparatuses, then they can only be those of us Plejaren or of our federated ones. Otherwise, they are exclusively earthly unknown flying apparatuses, like secret aircraft of futuristic design, etc., as they are constructed in secret aircraft construction factories, mainly in Area 51 in the USA, but also in South America, Russia, China, and Canada.
Is this really all clear and real?
Absolutely.
This once again triggers angry cries and howls among the UFO believers, the ufologists, and the alleged contactees, which in turn makes me a snail again.
This will be so, because the deceivers, liars, swindlers, and charlatans regarding alleged contacts with Earth foreigners, as well as the UFO believers in general, and especially those who boast of being experts in ufology, do not want to understand that apart from us, the Plejaren and our federated ones, no other Earth foreigners come to Earth. And also that those who came here in former times found their way to Earth only by means of old coordinate records, which led back to connections with old Nocodemian peoples. Only such Earth foreigners and future Earth followers have come to Earth, but never any others from foreign galaxies and solar systems that did not have the coordinates handed down. So others did not reach Earth, as alleged contactors lie and claim.
This, apart from the skrills and the bioorganic flying objects and the future of Earth from other dimensions, as you say. If all the many claims about contacts between the human beings of Earth and extraterrestrials were true, then Earth would be teeming with extraterrestrials.
That is correct. This fact, however, will not change the fact that countless UFO believers remain addicted to all those liars. Swindlers, cheats, and charlatans who fraudulently and mendaciously claim to have maintained or had contact with us or with other Earth foreigners. There is only one exception that concerns you, and that is also only because certain provisions and justifications are given for it, and are connected with a great and Earth-encompassing mission. It would also be ridiculous to even assume that Earth foreigners would come to Earth just to say hello to some Earth humans, or to bring stupid and dubious messages based on pure religious belief. If Earth foreigners come here and make contact with Earth humans, then this only happens if a global mission is connected with it, as is the case in our case. Such a mission, however, requires very specific conditions which must be taken into account and which determine that many years of hard work have to be done, whereby an individual person is contacted so that there is no public appearance of the Earth foreigners. So it is not enough to write just 1, 2 or 3 little books about alleged contacts with Earth foreigners and in relation to dubious messages. But if there is a true contact, then it means a lifelong, very arduous and hard work for the earthly contact person, as it is in your case. To do such work in relation to the mission connected with it, and also to fulfill it, requires much more than an Earth human being is usually able to accomplish. The work can only be fulfilled by certain existing abilities of consciousness, as well as energies and forces which have to be created and ignited again and again. Nobody knows this better than you, who are assigned to such a task and have been fulfilling it unwaveringly for about 70 years now. If it otherwise turns out that Earth foreigners are officially coming to Earth, it is in the context of appearing open and contacting the governments of Earth or an individual government of a state.
I am not going to make any specific comments. Then there is a question about Gilgamesh, which you mentioned. In 1976, at the 69th contact, I spoke to your daughter Simyase about the fact that Gilgamesh was about 7.5 meters tall. But in 1988, at the 222nd contact, I talked to Quetzal about the fact that Gilgamesh was only 3 meters tall. This was based on the fact that Gilgamesh was a morphogenesis and therefore had the ability to change his height and appearance. In these conversations with Simyase and Quetzal, it was unfortunately forgotten to mention that Gilgamesh was 7.5 meters tall at the time his spaceship was damaged. After which he changed his height, and by the time he was in Uruk-Gart, he was only 3 meters tall. In the course of time, he reduced his height by about 120 centimeters, so that he was then only about 1.8 meters tall. I think this should be made clear, before another hooligan thinks that there is a contradiction.
That would really be possible, which is probably why it is good that you mentioned it.
Now I have a question about your concept of God, which you have been using for fairy tales and fables since time immemorial, such as God of flowers or goddess of the sun, etc. What we have to imagine by God in this way. You already explained at the 503rd official contact conversation on the 9th of September 2010. But could you please explain again what has to be understood by God and goddess in a few more words?
It must not be understood as a creation being, that is to say, not as a god or a goddess, as a creator or creatoress, as Earth humans, through their religious and sectarian beliefs, misunderstand this. Basically, we understand in the above-mentioned way, that is to say with reference to God and goddess, one fantastically conceived fable creature each, which is inserted into fairy tales and fables as protector or guardian or as ruler in a fantastic way.
It was necessary to ask about it again, because I am supposed to give someone a better interpretation of your answer. But your answer is now sufficient. But if you still have time, I would like to discuss some things with you that should not be official.
There is still some time left before I have to do my duties again. If it takes longer, then we can continue our conversation on the 16th of April when I come back for correction work.
Then the following,